Hello. Today I would like to explain why we should add the Fast and Furious franchise, the whole thing, to the Criterion collection this year of 2020. Next slide, please. Part 1. What's the deal with the Criterion collection? Well, it's a collection of a bunch of movies for nerds. Next slide, please. The requirements for inclusion are being, quote, an exemplary film of its kind, or, as I have noticed in my research, just being some bullshit from France. So, knowing those two things, that these are the only requirements for becoming part of the Criterion collection, I would like to now explain why the Fast and Furious franchise, the whole thing, all 9 movies, are exemplary films of their kind and do deserve to be part of the Criterion collection. Next slide, please. Part 2, a Fast and Furious vision of America, or how the Fast and Furious franchise acts as a mirror to America of the past, present, and future. All right, next slide. I would first like to talk about the naming conventions of the Fast and Furious franchise.
You're doing great.
As we can see here, the first one was called The Fast and the Furious. This is the one where Paul Walker starred in the role as Brian O'Connor, an undercover FBI cop who was tasked with finding out who was stealing VCRs. Spoiler alert, it was Vin Diesel. That's the real plot of the movie. The second movie was Too Fast, Too Furious, but spelled numerically. This one was interesting because Vin Diesel did not return for the role because he was making Riddick 1. So instead, it starred Paul Walker and Tyrese as Paul Walker's friend, Tyrese. The third one was a spin-off, The Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. This is when we were introduced to Han and Lil Bow Wow, who did not appear in any of the other movies. The fourth one is called Fast ampersand Furious. This is the point where they stopped using the word and started using an ampersand, which to me is fascinating linguistically. But I'm not going to get into that.
Get into it.
The fifth one is called Fast 5, which, despite being called the Fast 5, had 9 people in the crew. Fast and Furious 6 had 7 people in the crew, and Furious 7 had, once again, 9 main characters. The 8th movie is called Fate of the Furious, because it's like a pun, get it? And then the 9th movie will be called F9. Why it's called that? Fuck if I know. Next slide. Spoiler alert though, because I'm about to explain something else that's kind of fucked up about the Fast and Furious franchise. Next slide. So in Tokyo Drift, Han fucking dies. This is Han getting hit by a car. Look, we can watch it a couple times. Yep, that's him. You sure think, oh damn, it's hard to survive that, huh? Well, that's the 3rd movie. But the problem is, in the 4th movie, he's fucking in it. He's in it. He's in it. He's in the 4th movie, guys. And he's also in the 5th movie and the 6th movie. So after the 6th movie, they decide that Tokyo Drift will take place between the 6th and 7th movies. So in the 7th movie, they have a funeral.
Oh my god.
So now, but he's alive in the 9th movie. So now, the official timeline for the Fast Saga looks like movies 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 3, 7, 8, 9. I know what you're thinking, Dan. What the fuck does this have to do with anything about America? Well, does it remind you of something else weird? Like, for example, oh wait, the American experiment, like how we're just kind of making this shit up as we go along, just like Fast and Furious, or like, spoiler alert, the Constitution.
What?
How amendments are built into our Constitution at every point. And like how America throughout its history has really just kind of did whatever the fuck it wanted. For example, this is the timeline of voting rights in America. So when we started 1789, when we wrote the Constitution, it was only white land-owning men, and the requirements were different for every state. The 14th Amendment in 1868 allowed non-white men to vote. And it's mainly black men because Native Americans could vote. The 19th Amendment in 1920, like 40, 80 years, 60, however many years later, 50 years later, allowed white women to vote. Indian Citizenship Act allowed Indian non-American citizens to vote. That was in 1824. 23rd, D.C. becomes a state and they can vote now. D.C. was not a state until 1961. I didn't know that. The 24th Amendment eliminated the poll tax, which kept a lot of people of color from voting. Then the Voting Rights Act of 1965 also had to reinforce that. And then the 26th Amendment gave voting rights to 18 to 21-year-olds because they were like, hey, if we're fighting the Vietnam War and dying, why can't we vote? Next slide. I would now like to talk about how Fast and Furious is a reflection of the military-industrial complex.
Oh my
So,
God.
in Dwight D. Eisenhower's farewell address, he said all this. He warned against essentially a military-industrial complex because all of these arms companies were relying on war to make a profit. So then America economically had an interest in war. I would now like to discuss how Fast and Furious has a complex relationship to the military-industrial complex. Next slide. So the first Fast and Furious movie, Brian O'Connor plays a cop who's trying to figure out who is stealing these things. VCRs from the back of 18-wheelers. This movie is interesting because you don't learn until halfway through, when Vin Diesel and Brian O'Connor have become friends or arguably lovers, that it is in fact Vin Diesel who is stealing the VCRs. So all of a sudden, Brian O'Connor is not necessarily the good guy, and we're not sure where to think of Vin Diesel as the bad guy. By the end of the movie, Brian O'Connor lets Vin Diesel go, which, as Dwight D. Eisenhower would say, is part of how we need to start thinking about solving problems with peace rather than with arms. Fast forward to Fate of the Furious. They're stealing nukes from the Russians, and they're working with the CIA to do it. This shit's crazy. I mean, if that isn't American history to a T right there. From the Boston, this is essentially the Boston Tea Party of America, of Fast and Furious, and this is where we're at now. Yeah. So yeah, shit's crazy, and Fast and Furious really does act as a mirror to all these parts of American culture.
Wow.
I would now like to go on to my next part, I think. Next slide. Part 3, Fast and Furious as a queer epic.
Yeah.
Okay, next slide, please. I have done a lot of research into this. Next slide. A lot of research. Next slide. A lot of research. Next slide. A whole lot of research. And what I have found is that, next slide, Fast and Furious is, in fact, a queer love story, and one of the greatest ones that has ever been encountered within the Western canon. It is up there with Moby Dick, Lord of the Rings,
Dick.
the Bible, and Cats.
Yeah.
This is like just Dan right there.
Next slide, please. Okay, so I know Saturday Night Live already did a parody called The Fast and the Bi-Curious, but this is not a fucking joke. This is a serious examination as to just how gay the Fast and Furious franchise is. There will be no jokes during this part. Okay, next slide, please. So these are all images that I feel like show just how fucking gay that this series is. It shown across these graphics, we got romances, we got romances, and we got everything in between. We also have a variety of sexual tension going. Don't they look like they're about to kiss right now? All right, next slide. I would now like to point to maybe the biggest piece of evidence that this is in fact a queer epic. So this comes in the fourth movie when Giselle, played by Gal Gadot, is talking to Vin Diesel because she's wondering why, hey, Vin Diesel, why are you working on cars and not ogling my beautiful body and face? So she says, are you one of those boys who prefers cars to women? And Vin Diesel says, I'm one of those boys that appreciates a fine guardian regardless of the make. Why is this important? Because it proves that Dom Toretto fucks dudes, or at least kisses and holds them tenderly. Next, hold on, let's try to remember what this was. Let's throw it up. Oh, okay, these, hit it twice. Yeah, these are the only queer movies that are on the Criterion collection right now. Mal Noche, Multiple Maniacs, and Fox and His Friends. They're also all fucking boring and weird as shit. And no, I haven't seen them. I looked up their Wikipedia pages. Mal Noche is just some bullshit about a guy who works at a gas station. Multiple Maniacs is like John Waters being fucking crazy. And I don't know what the fuck that is. However, next slide. the Fast and Furious franchise is both gay and rad. And I feel like we can use a lot of, I feel like that's an important aspect of the gay experience that is being overlooked currently by the Criterion collection. I will now pause for any photo ops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take a photo of like the FaceTime of this.
Robbie has to take it too.
I'll go through and like screenshot it.
All right.
I can pause and
I would like now to move
screenshot
into my final arguments.
Wow.
Next slide. The Fast and Furious franchise, this is about why a Fast and Furious franchise deserves to be considered an important piece of art that reflects America and the queer experience. The Fast and Furious franchise at its core is trying to answer a simple question. How do we survive this awful world?
That's timely.
The whole Fast and Furious franchise, though it did not start that way, has become a franchise about family, about how we can use them to survive, who they are, how we can pick them, and what we do for them. And if that isn't the gayest thing of all, I don't know what the fuck is. And the fact that they have devoted over $1 billion and 9 movies to answering this question, I think to me shows that it should be considered an important piece of art. I don't know what the next slide is, but hit me with it. So in conclusion, please add every Fast and Furious movie to the Criterion collection. My love for these movies is not ironic.
Wow.
Love and irony are incompatible.
That last slide. Rest in power, Paul Walker.
Aww. Wow. That was wow, Dan. That was really good. Holy shit.
I would also like to see a version of this of you hammered while giving this talk.
I don't think I could do it.
What do you mean? You gotta practice.
Dan, that was
That was so good.
Thank you.
It was good. Oh man.